In a quiet town where everyone knew each other's names, an unexpected tragedy occurred that shattered the peace and ignited a whirlwind of speculation. Known for her warmth and vibrant spirit, Becky's life was seemingly picture perfect, but beneath the surface lay a web of secrets that would soon be revealed. This is the case of Becky Bliefnick. Hi everyone, welcome back to True Crime List with me, Alyssa. If you are new, welcome, glad you could join. So the case we're going to be talking about today irritates me. And as you will see, justice was served, but I cannot stand when these criminals are accused of being a certain way or acting a certain way, and instead of taking accountability, they just say, no, that's not how I was, that's actually how they were, referring to the victim. Yet not one person can corroborate that the criminal is telling the truth, and there are so many instances that have been documented to say otherwise. It pisses me off, especially when the victim is no longer here with us to even say their piece or defend themselves. So let's get into it. Rebecca Bernadette Postel, who went by Becky, was born and raised in Quincy, Illinois to her parents Bill and Bernadette Postel. And when she was born, she immediately had an older sister, Sarah. Becky would attend Quincy Notre Dame High School, where she was actually named valedictorian, and this wasn't the only academic achievement she would earn in her lifetime. As she went on to seek a bachelor's degree in biological science with a minor in chemistry, Becky would graduate cum laude from Quincy University. It was when she was attending university where she would meet a guy by the name of Tim Bliefnick. Tim was a former Quincy University Hall of Fame football player, but him and Becky would ultimately just remain friends even after graduating college. After graduating, Becky would go on to work for Sanofi Aventis as one of their top performing pharmaceutical sales representatives, but she always knew she wanted to eventually pursue a career in nursing, as she felt that was her true calling. Becky was the type of person that was just so generous and caring. I mean, if you are sick or not feeling well, you could always count on Becky to come in and check on you, or on other occasions help assemble furniture, like really whatever you needed. But she didn't do this for recognition. This was just how she was. She even had a humorous side to her where she came up with this idea for the upcoming school Olympics that the obstacle course could end with a whoopee cushion fart to stop the timer. I mean, come on, that's pretty funny. About 2 years after graduating from college, Tim, who I had mentioned earlier is one of Becky's friends from college, would eventually start dating. Then on September 18th, 2009, Tim and Becky would end up getting married, and shortly after they decided to start trying for a baby, as they did not want to wait any longer. I mean, Becky longed to become a mother. As they welcomed their first child, Becky would quit her job in pharmaceutical sales to become a stay-at-home mom, while Tim would continue on with his career path in the recycling industry. They would end up having another son, and they were her absolute world. But Becky and Tim's relationship seemed to be loving and strong, but this would eventually fade. After 5 years of marriage, things turned sour where Tim progressively became more controlling and manipulative, and on top of his behavioral changes, he started not helping out around the house, you know, your typical everyday cooking, cleaning, picking up after the kids, and so on. I mean, if you have kids, you know how hard it can feel at times to find the time to do everyday tasks, not to mention doing it all alone with no help, when in fact you have a partner to help but isn't helping. And this is what was happening to Becky, where she felt she was shouldering most of the load at home. The marriage would end up becoming more strained when Becky decided to go back to school to become a nurse. I mean, she had a successful career in the pharmaceutical industry, but she always wanted to do something in the medical field where she could help people. And again, she felt that nursing was her calling. Becky's friends and family supported this decision of hers to go back to school and pursue a career she was passionate about, but there was one person who did not support this decision. And if you haven't guessed already, it was her husband, Tim. Now, he believed that her taking on a career as a nurse would cause too much stress on her. And knowing how stressful school can be while raising two children, he never stepped up to help her stresses, and this is partly why I believe the reasoning for not supporting her due to the stress it would cause on her is absolute BS. Because if this was the case, he would help out more, in my opinion. But despite Tim's lack of support, Becky would go on to graduate cum laude from Blessing Raymond College of Nursing and Health Sciences and even receive the Faculty Outstanding Senior Award. I mean, Becky was so intelligent and wanted to serve her medical community. But something even more remarkable was that Becky actually gave birth to their third child during spring break of her senior year, and she only missed one day of school. I mean, I watched my mom go through nursing school while she was raising 5 kids at home, and man, it did not look easy. So I gotta say, these women are superheroes. After graduating from nursing school, Becky went on to work as a nurse at Quincy Medical Group before transitioning to Blessing Hospital Emergency Room in Quincy. When the COVID pandemic hit, Becky went on to work as a traveling nurse where she worked at 2 hospitals in Missouri. In 2020, Becky was nominated for the International Daisy Award, recognizing the care and kindness she provided to their patients, and this foundation honors exceptional care given by extraordinary nurses. With all that to say, Becky touched so many lives while working as a nurse, and everyone in her life felt important and special because that's how she viewed and treated everyone around her. In addition to becoming a registered nurse, she was also a certified trauma nurse specialist and sexual assault nurse examiner. As she was working at Blessing Hospital, she was working towards obtaining her nurse practitioner certification and made time to volunteer at St. Peter's Grade School Association. So if you can tell by now, Becky was dedicated to her profession and community, but her most important devotion was to her family. She was described as the quintessential boy mom by going all in with fishing and frog hunting and supported all her boys when it came to sports they wanted to play. Even one year for Halloween, she made her sons Transformer costumes that actually transformed, and I think that is so awesome. And this is when I will admit my weaknesses, and one of those is definitely DIYing. So back to Tim and Becky's marriage. On January 21st, 2021, Tim actually ended up filing for divorce and hinted at the fact that this was due to Becky's personality change after becoming a nurse. However, Becky's family did not feel this way. Her sister Sarah actually thought Tim filing was because he could not control her anymore, as if Becky was kind of coming out of his restraint. I mean, he didn't want her to become a nurse, and well, she did it anyways, despite him not stepping up with the kids and household tasks. Although Becky asked him to go to marriage counseling, he refused. So shortly after the divorce was filed, on January 25th, Becky filed a petition requesting she be granted temporary sole parental responsibility so that the kids would spend majority time with her until the divorce was finalized. So after 11 years of marriage, the two were now entering a contentious divorce where they fought over just about everything from money, the marital home, and the custody of their 3 children. In July of 2021, the court ordered that both Tim and Becky be granted temporary parental responsibilities, which meant they would have to alternate each week with the kids. Both Tim and Becky were not happy with this 50-50 parenting schedule, but they had to agree to the terms. And I can just imagine the stress all this would cause on them and their children. This is where Becky started to confide in her friends and her sister Sarah via text messages, where it seemed like she wanted to start documenting the abuse she was enduring from Tim. On one occasion, she sent a text to a friend that Tim allegedly had screamed in her face, shoved her in front of the kids, and thrown things across the room at her. But Tim would actually claim that Becky was the one that was vengeful and combative, where Tim would even try to get an order of protection against Becky, stating she was the one that stalked and harassed him, but this order ended up not being granted by the judge. But the same thing would happen when Becky tried filing an order of protection against Tim, which was also not granted. So it's believed that because Becky had filed the protection order right after Tim did, the court kind of just saw it as gamesmanship. But the judge did order the two to stay away from each other's residence except when exchanging the kids. The judge also ordered Tim to return a 9mm handgun that Becky had given Tim as a gift earlier in the marriage, but since it was under her name, it was ordered to be given back. Yet, Tim never returned that gun. So this leads us to Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2023, when 41-year-old Becky appeared to be having a normal day. But that night, something abnormal was going on. The next day, Becky would wake up to a text from her neighbor that their security camera picked up a person in Becky's driveway. This confirmed Becky's uneasy feeling she had that night, as she was hearing voices in her backyard and thought her motion light turned on, and this led her to feeling paranoid. At this point, her neighbor thought maybe it was just a prowler that was trying to find stuff to steal. A few days later, Becky ended up having abdominal surgery. Then 3 days after surgery, on February 22nd of 2023, Becky was home alone and asked Tim if he could keep the kids another night, as she wasn't feeling good due to her recovering from surgery. The following day, on February 23rd, Tim had tried to reach Becky, but with no luck on her answering her phone, he texted Becky's father, Bill, who also voiced concerns to Tim that he was not able to get a hold of her either. So Becky's dad, Bill, made the decision to go by her home to see if she was there. When Becky's father arrived to her home, he found his daughter no longer alive, laying on her bathroom floor. He immediately called 911, where investigators with the Quincy Police Department would respond to the scene. It was determined that Becky suffered from 14 gunshot wounds, all of which were not instantly fatal. One gunshot in particular hit her spinal cord, which ended up paralyzing her, meaning she laid there on a cold bathroom floor, unable to move for minutes as she slowly passed away. At the crime scene, police found that the suspect had broke in by prying open one of the children's bedroom windows that was located on the second floor of the home. As you can see here, there were tool marks on the window from it being pried open. Also, there was a shoe print found near the point entry into the bedroom from the window. Once the suspect entered the home, they approached Becky's bedroom door and proceeded to violently kick the door open, as pieces of wood was found at the crime scene. So I am not sure if the bedroom door was locked or if Becky heard someone trying to get in and ran to the door to close it, but the attacker would end up getting into her bedroom. Shortly after the suspect entered her bedroom, investigators believe that Becky tried to dial 911 on her cell phone, because when they had opened her phone, she had dialed 91126 before her phone was knocked out of her hands and was found behind her bedroom door. There were also 8 9mm shell casings found at the crime scene, along with small shreds of plastic that was found around Becky's body. When Becky's sister Sarah found out about her passing, she immediately thought Tim was the prime suspect. Sarah told investigators about Becky and Tim's contentious divorce, and this is when Tim became a person of interest. It was also brought to police that a year before Becky's death, she sent Sarah this text: "If something ever happens to me, please make sure the number one person of interest is Tim, as that is the one who would do something to me. I'm putting this in writing that I'm fearful he will somehow harm me, come after me, or will try to do something to me that takes me away from the kids or the kids away from me. He has already lied multiple times to paint himself as a victim and me as the perpetrator, when it is absolutely the other way around. No, I have not sent this to mom or dad, as I don't want them to be out of their minds with worry." Now, Becky's sister Sarah said that this text message Becky sent was actually triggered by the murder of one of her colleagues, a nurse that she worked with who was murdered by her partner. So it's believed that Becky wanted to tell someone in writing about her concerns with her safety in regard to Tim, in case something were to happen, like what her colleague endured. So a week before Becky's murder on February 14th, Valentine's Day, another neighbor's security camera picked up a person riding a bike in the middle of the night towards Becky's house, then again in the opposite direction of her house. The night before Becky's murder, her neighbor's security camera again picked up a person who was seen walking down the driveway towards the back of Becky's house around 1:05 a.m. Then the same person was seen again 48 minutes later walking in the opposite direction. So police believe the person who was riding the bike was the same person shown in Becky's driveway, because every time the person on the bike was caught on camera, so was the person in the driveway. But unfortunately, the person seen in the cameras were not identifiable, even to the point where police could not even make out if it was a man or a woman. However, police would end up finding a bike less than a half a block from Tim's residence, which had no reflectors on the wheel. And if we pull up that picture of the person riding a bike towards Becky's house, there are also no reflectors captured on the surveillance. So with the finding of the bike and knowledge of Becky and Tim's contentious divorce, this prompted investigators to execute a search warrant on Tim's house and car. 2 weeks after Becky's death, on March 13th of 2023, Tim was arrested and charged with her murder, in which he was held without bond. He also invoked his right to a speedy trial, which means prosecutors had to try the case within 90 days of his arrest. Upon his arrest, Becky's case made national news, and the reason is probably not what you're thinking. It was partly due because of an appearance Tim had on the game show Family Feud a few years prior. And if you aren't familiar with the show, it's basically where two families compete to guess the most popular answers to questions. Survey says, if you've heard of that. Then the host, which I think is still Steve Harvey, reveals the most popular answers, and whichever team earns the most points wins. Well, y'all are not going to believe this, but one of the questions Tim was asked was, "What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?" And his response was, "Said I do."
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding?
Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
So I believe it was before his trial, but Tim did an interview with 48 Hours, and they asked him about this answer to this question, and Tim basically stated he was thinking of what others would say was their biggest mistake given the divorce ratings, and that actually was an answer which gained his team points. But years later, when the public found out about the charges he was facing, it had people talking. Now, I do have to say that prosecutors did not believe that his response had anything to do with the murder case, but it's definitely strange given what we know now. 3 months after Becky's death, on May 23rd of 2023, Tim's trial began, and his defense attorney, I don't know what it is, but she gives me a bad taste in my mouth, and it could be because of a comment she made, which we will get into in a second. Prosecutors had over 200 pieces of evidence and heard from 46 witnesses. To start off, the suspect broke through Becky's window with a crowbar due to the tool marks left at the scene. Well, in fact, there was a crowbar found in Tim's basement of his home. Now, an expert did testify who compared the tool marks left on the window that was pried open to this crowbar that was found at Tim's, and basically due to microscopic consistencies, the expert could not say with certainty that this crowbar made the marks. In regards to the shreds of plastic found around her body, turns out police found a stack of Aldi grocery bags in Tim's home that matched the plastic shreds found at the scene, which led prosecutors to believe that Tim fired the gun through an Aldi bag in an attempt to either catch the shell casings or muffle the sound of the gun. But Tim's defense refuted, stating that everyone in town has stacks of Aldi grocery bags in their house, therefore it's not incriminating. For me, this is hard to believe because none of Becky's neighbors heard anything the night of her murder. And I mean, a gun went off 14 times that we know of, and that's a lot of times a gun went off for no one to hear any of them. So that makes me believe that he was attempting to muffle the sound. And speaking of the gun, police found 54 shell casings at Tim's home, and when compared to the shell casings found at the crime scene, 27 of these shell casings found at Tim's had been fired by the same gun used in the murder. And you know what Tim's attorney stated in his defense? That the expert's opinion about the shell casings are subject to human error. Like, we're just going to keep going, so let's talk about the bike for a second. Tim had created a Facebook account under a fake name of John Smith. When police downloaded information off Tim's phone, they found that this Facebook account was searching for a bike for sale when he ran across this blue Schwinn without reflectors on the wheels. And if you recall in the video of the person riding the bike in the direction of Becky's home, there were no reflectors on the wheels either. I do have to say though that Tim's DNA was not found on the bike, and prosecutors can't say for certain it was the same bike from the surveillance footage. I think a major item that led the jury and probably even some of the public to believing Tim committed the murder was due to his cell phone searches, which included, quote, how to open my door with a crowbar, how to make a homemade pistol silencer, and how to clean gunpowder off your hands.
Homelyville.com, how to open window from outside.
Yes.
Google search, can I force open my door with a crowbar if I locked myself out?
Yes.
Homeemergency.wonderhowto.com, how to open almost any door with easy lockpicking trick.
Yes.
Phone was used to search how many cops in Quincy, Illinois. Phone was used to search how to make a homemade pistol silencer.
That is correct.
Phone was used to search average Quincy Police Department response time.
That's correct.
How can I check if a gun is registered to me?
That's correct.
Can you just wash off gunpowder residue?
That's correct.
Can you identify if a shotgun shell was shot out of a specific gun?
Yes.
Look, I don't think it takes a rocket science to speculate that these searches are sketchy given how Becky's home was broken into and what was found at the crime scene. But of course, the defense argued, pointing out the fact that there was no date or time of when those searches were conducted. But let's just say Tim searched those questions after Becky's murder. Why would Tim want to know how to clean gunpowder off your hands? Like, is this a common search that I don't know about with gun users? Another discovery, which actually had timestamps, was that on Valentine's Day, Tim made over 200 online searches on his computer for a specific license plate and car VIN number. Well, it turns out this license plate matched a truck that was parked outside of Becky's driveway on Valentine's Day. And if you can recall, there was a person caught on surveillance footage in the driveway that night. After finding this information out, I just can't help but think that this person caught on surveillance on Valentine's Day night was not looking for items to steal like Becky and her neighbor had predicted, but it was probably Tim scouting out her home to see how he could break in. Also, that truck ended up being a guy that Becky was dating at the time. So it makes sense why Tim was vigorously searching for information on this vehicle. So we have the evidence, and now prosecutors needed a motive. At this point, it can be assumed, well, they're going through a contentious divorce. Maybe Tim thought it would be easier to get rid of Becky. But that's actually not what prosecutors presented. In fact, they showed evidence that Becky had information about Tim's family that was going to come out in their divorce trial that was scheduled the week after Becky's murder. So let me explain for a second, as we haven't touched on this yet. Back in May of 2021, Becky texted a longtime friend, Nicole, quote, he told me, meaning Tim, if I outed his dad, that he, his dad, would probably have to move then kill himself. I absolutely think he would try to take the kids sometime. End quote. A month later, on June 4th of 2021, Becky was Facebook messaging with a former coworker who was also named Becky, that she did not want Tim's father, Ray, to ever be around her kids unsupervised, as his father had a history of perversion and abusing minor children. Becky started to become worried that Tim would try and secretly run off with their kids, and she even mentioned on Facebook messages that she believes Tim has true mental health problems. Oh, and before I forget, I had mentioned that Tim's attorney really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think it stemmed from this. When the attorney was doing an interview with 48 Hours, the interviewer brought up the many friends who claimed Becky expressed great fear of Tim, and her response was, that's a lot of girl talk. And I'm mind blown by this response, given the fact that this part of the conversation had to do with potential abuse Becky was enduring, and his attorney says it was girl talk. Like, I wish I was making this up. Now, despite Tim's defense attorney refuting the evidence found, the jury simply did not believe he had nothing to do with Becky's death. So after more than 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Tim guilty on all charges for shooting and killing his wife. The charges included 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion. At his sentencing, the judge really made a powerful speech in my opinion, so I am going to share a clip with you here.
The arguments of counsel that were made here today, Mr. Bliefnick, you researched this murder, you planned this murder, you practiced this murder, you broke into her house, and you shot her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. I don't know how long it took you to do that. Some of those shots were fired while she was lying on the ground. And you did all of that while your children were upstairs at your house, lying snug in their beds. The court believes that the appropriate sentence for each of the 2 counts of first-degree murder would be natural life in prison. Court believes that the 3rd count of home invasion, appropriate sentence is life in prison.
After we now know what we know, I think back to when Tim texted Becky's father and basically allowed him to find his daughter in such a gruesome way. Like, he knew exactly how he left Becky the night of her murder and had the audacity to basically lure her father to find her that way. Like, how disgusting of a human can you be to do that? And let's not forget that at any point of committing the crime did he think about his kids, ages 5, 10, and 12, that now not only lost their mom, but also their dad. Becky's family holds onto the memories they had with her while she was still alive, and if you're wondering about the kids, they are living with Becky's parents who are in the process of adopting them. Becky's sister Sarah did speak out, stating the kids are continuing to do everything young kids do while growing up, like going to school, taking field trips, and playing football, but there will always be one piece missing. And I just pray for healing for all those in Becky's life. As for Tim, he has not been allowed any contact with his kids since he was arrested. But as always, let's not forget that Becky's life, impact, and story matter. So that is it for today's case. Please y'all be safe out there and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.